Hey everybody, this is Angela Sasser, painter, creative writer, and artisan of angelasasser.com. Today I wanted to do a quick little video to show you guys how I get my digital line art that's created in Photoshop onto watercolor paper. I've got a lot of questions about this process and I've evolved it over the years, so I wanted to show you how I do that transfer process now. And for instance, the paintings you see here behind me, they were created first in Photoshop. I drew them in digital first, and then they were transferred onto paper and painted after being inked. So they go from point A, digital, to point B, inked and watercolored. So let's take a look. So here we have the tools I'll be using to get this digital line art onto this paper. Now there are a couple of ways to do this that I've done over the years. I originally used to use a roll of graphite paper, which you would put the graphite paper on top of the paper there, and then put the line art on top and trace over it, and then the pressure would transfer the graphite onto the paper. I stopped doing this because after using graphite paper, it would just get smudges everywhere, and I'd have to go and clean it up and erase any of the dust that might have been left over, and it was just kind of messy, and I didn't really like the graphite rolls. Another way I used to do was to actually color with a thick bit of graphite across the line art on the back, just like saturate this with the graphite, then wipe off all the dust, and then basically use that as a poor man's graphite. But it would have less dust than the graphite paper, or rather it would just transfer more cleanly once you used it. I actually preferred doing the poor man's graphite paper by coloring on the back, because it was just cleaner somehow. But these days I prefer to use the light table, and I'll get to that in a second. The first thing I did is, of course, you have to have the drawing you want to transfer. And this was drawn in Photoshop. And I've got my paper already cut and ready. It's already cut to size and ready to go. And I actually, because this was a larger piece of paper, I had to, or rather it was a larger drawing, I had to print first off an 11 by 17 printout and then do another printout and tape them together. So it's actually two pieces of paper taped together. And what you want to do when you have to join pictures like this is, I've got some tape here and tape here. You do not want to have too big of an overlap here, because when you turn on the light, it'll be hard to see where you've doubled up on the paper. So another thing is that people ask me, why don't I just print out this line art directly onto my paper? Which is possible. My Epson is capable of doing that, and I can paint over the Epson ink, but I don't really like to do that because if you look real close at this line art is very, very sloppy, and that's because it's just quicker for me to very loosely draw on the computer. So what I like to do is just print this out, and as I'm transferring to the paper, I'll clean up the lines and the elements and sort of redraw them as I go. And it just gives me more fine control. I still find that when I'm drawing on my Cintiq on the computer in Photoshop that I just don't have the fine control, and it takes me a lot longer to sit there and rotate the canvas and get it to where I can make that perfect stroke. So even though this seems like a lot more work, it's still faster and more comfortable for me. So next I've put my watercolor paper on top of the printout, and I've used artist tape to secure it so it'll stay in position while I'm tracing it. And you have to use artist tape because when you pull this up, you don't want it to pull off the surface of your paper. So definitely use artist tape because it is low tack and it's safer to use on painting paper. Otherwise, when you paint this edge, it'll have a distortion in it where you use your paint. Or if you're going to use regular tape, you may want to have a border or a margin here so you don't have any, you don't have to worry about how the edges of your paper looks. But if you're a perfectionist like me, you want to keep your edges clean, I paint all the way to bleed just because. So I've turned down all the studio lights. So you can see my busted old light tracer here. It's an Artograph. This thing is a bajillion years old. And here's how it works. Boom! Let there be light. So this is actually a pretty heavy watercolor paper. It's 140 pounds, 300 GSM, and it's Arch's hot press paper that comes off a block. And so it's as you can see, it's pretty thick. So you can actually use pretty thick paper with a light pad or a light table. So next, time to get to tracing. And here we are, about 2 hours later. I've finished transferring all the main details and I've cleaned up a little as I did that. I've also had to refine some of the smaller details such as her eyes and her jewelry, the little accent pieces of the eyes there in her necklace and whatnot. Sometimes those get lost when you're doing transfers like this, but that's when you can use a white plastic eraser to clean up the lines. And now she's ready for inking. So if you liked these unedited quick tutorials of mine, give me a like and subscribe and let me know in the comments. If you have any questions about the process, I'd be happy to answer them. And if you're a patron, you got to see this video 1 week before everyone else. So check out my Patreon, patreon.com/Angela Sasser. And I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.